Hello everyone, it's Liv here, aka Story Minded, and I'm finally going to get around to making the video for Chinese Cinderella by Adeline Yen Mei, or Ma. Because the text is quite short, I've sort of made notes on the different sections, but then I kind of stopped because where it's quite fragmented and quite sort of short and compact, I've made notes, but there's a point where I'm just going to sort of go through and just offer some ideas on her thoughts and feelings in line with what the sort of IGCSE looks at. But just to give a bit of context to Chinese Cinderella, it's an autobiography about Adeline in her younger years, growing up in a wealthy family in Hong Kong in the 1950s. She's rejected by her stepmother, and her father is a distant yet powerful character, and she spends much of her time at boarding school. So, first paragraph is, time went by relentlessly, and it was Saturday again. 8 weeks more, and it would be the end of term. In my case, perhaps the end of school forever. So instantly in this opening, we gain a sense of foreboding. It establishes the fact that for Adeline, it seems that school and education is something she values, and it's almost like a kind of, we gain the sense that it's kind of like a safe haven for her, somewhere where she wants to be, especially noted by or emphasised by the use of the ellipsis between, and it would be the end of term. In my case, perhaps the end of school forever. So her thoughts are trailing off, and this is like a concern for her. It's a worry that she's having. 4 of us were playing Monopoly. My heart was not in it, and I was losing steadily. Outside it was hot, and there was a warm wind blowing. The radio warned of a possible typhoon the next day. It was my turn, and I threw the dice. As I played, the thought of leaving school throbbed at the back of my mind like a persistent toothache. So the use of the simile with the persistent toothache shows a sense of physical pain. So there's also emotional pain at the thought of leaving school, and it's kind of building up this profile of Adeline and how it's not just purely an emotional pain. It's actually like a physical pain for her to think about the fact that she's going to be taken away from the one place where she obviously feels something. She feels some kind of value or self-worth. You could argue, especially as the text develops, you start to see how much education means to her and how much it's like an escape for her. Adeline, Marmaine Valentino was calling. You can't go now, Mary protested. For once I'm winning. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. You've landed on my property. $35, please. Oh, good afternoon, Mother Valentino. We all stood up and greeted her. So I'm assuming Mother Valentino is someone who works at the boarding school where Adeline currently is. And it's almost like an authority figure, and it shows that where she was calling Adeline's name rather than go into her directly, it's almost like creates this connotations of almost like how you would call a pet over or an animal, and it's kind of establishing the fact that adults don't seem to have respect for Adeline, and this is going to be reiterated once we get to the next bit, because the chauffeur, her own chauffeur who works for her father, is rude to her. Is there anything else I've written down? Nope. And the fact that all the children, we all stood up and greeted her, it shows that there's a lot of respect that they have, because the actions sort of denote that. Adeline, didn't you hear me call you? Hurry up downstairs. Your chauffeur is waiting to take you home. And once again, the fact that her chauffeur has arrived rather than her own parents to collect her from boarding school kind of shows this distance that she has from her family. Full of foreboding, I ran downstairs as in a nightmare, wondering who had died this time. Father's chauffeur assured me everyone was healthy. Then why are you taking me home? I asked. How should I know? He answered defensively, shrugging his shoulders. Your guess is as good as mine. They give the orders and I carry them out. So once again, there's this distance and harsh tone. It's devoid of love. And it's sort of it's a very jarring simile with the I ran downstairs as in a nightmare, and we've already gained a sense that Adeline's been through a lot. especially with like wondering who had died this time. So this is obviously an extract from a larger memoir, but it mentions online, if you search, it mentions that she has a stepmother who rejects her, so making an assumption, I'm assuming her mother died, potentially. I don't know that for certain, but it seems that if she has a stepmother, there's kind of been some kind of tragedy or sort of some kind of bereavement that's happened to her in her life. So that's kind of building up, and is also linking in with that opening paragraph where it's like this sense of foreboding. You can get it from the opening, and it's sort of being confirmed later on in the text. Ooh. During the short drive home, my heart was full of dread, and I wondered what I had done wrong. Our car stopped at an elegant villa at mid-level, halfway up the hill between the peak and the harbour. And just to add to the bit previously, the question sort of shows a lack of communication. So the chauffeur himself doesn't know why he's been asked to collect Adeline, but the fact that her questions aren't being answered shows this like lack of respect for her. And the fact that she's in the car and she feels that she's responsible, or she doesn't know what she's done wrong, it's self-deprecation. So it shows how little Adeline thinks of herself. She has sort of a very low self-esteem, very negative perceptions of herself. I mean, for a child or even a young teenager to think that they're the cause of an issue sort of really shows that this isn't a happy home environment that she lives in. And that's kind of all the notes I got, and then I'll talk about some other things as we go along. So, where are we? I asked foolishly. Don't you know anything? The chauffeur replied rudely. This is your new home. Your parents moved here a few months ago. I had forgotten, I said as I got out. Our gum opened the door. Inside it was quiet and cool. Where is everyone? Your mother is out playing bridge. Your two brothers and little sister are sunbathing by the swimming pool. Your father is in his room and wants to see you as soon as you get home. So once again, where Adeline's arrived home, we're starting to establish this kind of sense that her siblings are like having a more relaxed time, like being by the swimming pool, sunbathing, relaxing. The mother is absent. She's off playing a game of cards with her friends, and the father's in his room and wants to see you as soon as you get home, and that's kind of putting him in a position of authority. But there's still this kind of like distance that it creates. Like the father isn't playing with his other children who are there, like Adeline's siblings. It's like there's this disconnect. So you really gain the sense that it feels very formal. It's like not an informal, loving home environment. It's a very sort of detached kind of place to be. See me in his room. I was overwhelmed by the thought that I had been summoned by father to enter the Holy of Holies, a place to which I had never been invited. Why? So as we start to learn more about the father, Adeline uses a lot of sort of religious imagery and associations. The fact that her father's room or study, it could be considered, it's like she refers to it as the Holy of Holies. It's like a sacred place. She's sort of in awe of it, and also overwhelmed can be quite a negative emotion. So it's kind of like she can't believe that she's been summoned to this place that she almost perceives as being sacred, which once again emphasizes that this isn't a loving home environment. It's a very sort of rigid, kind of authoritarian sort of environment to be in, where the father's at the head of the house and his children are summoned to him, which is quite uncomfortable to think about. And it ends on that paragraph with her rhetorical question of why. So she doesn't know. She's once again this lack of communication. Timidly, I knocked on the door. Father was alone, looking relaxed in his slippers and bathrobe, reading a newspaper. He smiled as I entered, and I saw he was in a happy mood. I breathed a small sigh of relief at first, but became uneasy when I wondered why he was being so nice, thinking, is this a giant ruse on his part to trick me? Dare I let my guard down? So Adeline's rhetorical questions and internal rhetorical questions really sort of drive home the fact that she hasn't necessarily got a comfortable relationship with her father, as in there's no trust. there seems to be subtle hints that her father is usually a very sort of strict or aggressive man. And the fact that she's saying, oh, he's in a happy mood is kind of like she's very much aware that he is a powerful man. And there's kind of this distance once again that's established between them. Sit down, he pointed to a chair. And that repetition of a bark in order is sort of like drumming home this sort of very much authoritative figure rather than a parental figure. He pointed to a chair. Don't look so scared. Here, take a look at this. They're writing about someone we both know, I think. He handed me the day's newspaper, and there, in one corner, I saw my name, Adeline Yen, in capital letters prominently displayed. So this is the first time that Adeline's sort of full name, and especially where it's in block capitals, kind of gives this sense of importance and that she's achieved something. Up until this point, all the other characters, apart from her friends who she was playing with, they're very much dismissive of her, and they don't treat her with much respect. But the fact that her name is in this newspaper is suddenly this kind of like reversal of what's been happening so far. It was announced today that 14-year-old Hong Kong schoolgirl Adeline Jiangling Yen of Sacred Heart Canossian School, Cane Road, Hong Kong, has won the first prize in the international playwriting competition held in London, England for the 1951 to 1952 school year. It's the first time that any local Chinese student from Hong Kong has won such a prestigious event. Besides a medal, the prize comes with a cash reward of £50. Our sincere congratulations, Adeline Yen, for bringing honour to Hong Kong. We are proud of you. So this is, I'm assuming that her father is the one who's reading this out. And it's kind of like, from a cultural point of view and a cultural perspective, especially considering this is the 1950s, that's kind of like a cultural thing as well, of like bringing honour to your household. It's sort of a stereotype nowadays, but especially for the context of the 1950s. In Chinese culture, there is this kind of perception of bringing honour to your household, bringing honour to your family, and sort of like achievements, this kind of expectation to achieve great things academically. So it's kind of like this is taking pride in place, and this is the reason why she's been summoned to her father's office. It's not for a reprimand, it's not for something negative, it's for something positive. Is it possible? Am I dreaming? Me, the winner. So once again, her rhetorical questions really emphasise the fact that Adeline has a lot of low self-esteem. She doesn't believe in herself. She can't believe that she's been able to do this. I was going up the lift this morning with my friend C.Y. Tong when he showed me this article and asked me, is the winner Adeline Jiangling Yen related to you? The two of you have the same uncommon last name. Now C.Y. himself has a few children about your age, but so far none of them has won an international literary prize as far as I know. So I was quite pleased to tell him, you are my daughter, well done. Once again, this sort of really shows how this is a very toxic, unhealthy parental relationship. The fact that it's like a very sort of twisted thing, like you're proud of your daughter for achieving this, but it's more so the fact that she's won this prize that you're proud of your child, rather than just being proud of your child because they are your child. It's a very negative thing to be. It's like it's pride for the sake of their achievement rather than just being proud because that is your child and you should love them unconditionally. But it's just sort of highlighting how not unethical, that's the wrong word, how emotionally like compromising this relationship is. And that's shown throughout the text with Adeline's perception of herself. She has really poor perception of herself. He looked radiant. For once he was proud of me. That hurts to read. In front of his revered colleague, C.Y. Tong, a prominent fellow businessman, also from Shanghai, I had given him face. I thought, is this the big moment I have been waiting for? My whole being vibrated with all the joy in the world. I only had to stretch out my hand to reach the stars. So that kind of metaphor, it's like her self-worth is suddenly lifted through making her father proud. And that's another sort of stereotypical cultural thing that often occurs in Asian cultures. Obviously, once again, times have changed, but especially for the context of the 1950s. Giving face is this cultural concept where you it's kind of like linked with success and achievements and prosperity, and the idea that her winning this prize sort of because she carries her father's name, in a sense, it's like this kind of idea of that she's given him bragging rights, really, in a way, although it's not to do with bragging. It's kind of about showing your best self and showing your success, and she feels proud that she's given her father face, like, oh yes, I've done good, I've been a good daughter, sort of thing. Tell me, how did you do it? He continued. How come you won? Once again, this sort of shows this like distance in their relationship, and it's almost like he himself is like, how have you been able to achieve this? Like, rather than congratulating her and bolstering her and praising her, he is questioning how his daughter has managed to do it, which once again shows this is a really not great parental relationship. Well, the rules and regulations were so very complicated. One really has to be dedicated just to understand what they want. Perhaps I was the only one determined enough to enter, and there were no other competitors. So this is really sad, because you kind of gain the sense that Adeline's so excited to talk to her father that they rarely talk. Like, they rarely have normal conversations. So it's kind of like, it's a very unorganic, if that's even a word. It's like, it's not an organic conversation. It's not a natural conversation you would have. And it's just very sad. It's very poignant. He laughed approvingly. I doubt it very much, but that's a good answer. Once again, that's emotional abuse, essentially. He's just putting his daughter down by like, I doubt it very much, but that's a good answer. So it's like, he laughed approvingly. So it's almost like they're having a joke, but she genuinely put the effort into winning this competition, and yet he's making a joke of that. It's just very uncomfortable. Please, father, I asked boldly, thinking it was now or never, may I go to university in England too, just like my brothers? So now we're getting into more of the sort of 1950s kind of concept of how, although times were changing for women, especially in the 1950s, there was still this kind of expectation that most women, even though there were more job roles that were being created for women, the 1950s is still very much like you would expect a mother or a woman or a young girl to grow up to become a mother and be a stay-at-home mother and provide for her husband in the home. So Adeline very much wants to escape, and she wants to go on to further her education. I do believe you have potential. Tell me, what would you study? Go on to the next picture. My heart gave a giant lurch as it dawned on me that he was agreeing to let me go. How marvellous it was simply to be alive. Study, I thought. Going to England is like entering heaven. Does it matter what you do after you get to heaven? So once again, we're getting a lot more of the religious imagery coming through, and how Adeline sees this as her escape, really. And like England is this kind of like paradise where she's going to be able to be free. But father was expecting an answer. What about creative writing? After all, I had just won first prize in an international writing competition. I planned to study literature. I'll be a writer. Writer, he scoffed. So once again, we're getting into the negative emotional abuse. This does constitute as emotional abuse, because you're actively putting your child down and like laughing at their ideas and like not listening to them, all their feelings or emotions. You're not nurturing them, you're just putting them down and being like, no, you're not going to do this. You're going to starve. What language are you going to write in, and who is going to read your writing? Though you may think you're an expert in both Chinese and English, your Chinese is actually rather elementary. As for your English, don't you think the native English speakers can write better than you? You can also see it as a kind of, obviously talking 1950s, you could also see this as a kind of like the father is trying to protect her, but because we sort of established from Adeline's perspective this really sort of tense parental relationship, it's kind of like it overrides that. Even if it's out of a place of protection, it's still putting her down. I waited in silence. I did not wish to contradict him. And those two short sentences once again show that Adeline is like, there's no room for negotiation with her father. It's his way or no way. You will go to England with third brother this summer. The way he refers to his like children by numbers, that's just really, it's just really odd and really uncomfortable. With third brother this summer, and you will go to medical school. After you graduate, you will specialise in I can never say this word. Obstetrics, which is caring for women who are having babies. Women will always be having babies. Women patients prefer women doctors. You will learn to deliver their babies. That's a foolproof profession for you, don't you agree? Agree? Of course I agreed. Apparently he had it all planned out. As long as he let me go to university in England, I would study anything he wished. How did that line go in Wordsworth's poem? Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive. Father, I shall go to medical school in England and become a doctor. Thank you very, very much. So it's kind of like Adeline has her own dreams and ambitions, but in order to appease her father, she's just going along with his ideas so she can escape. And so she can actually get away to England to obviously study what her father wants for her. Obviously, because this is an extract from the full piece, I've never actually read the full story of Chinese Cinderella, so I'm not sure if she does do as her father wants or if she goes against his wishes, but it's kind of interesting to sort of really see her thought processes and how the kind of, you could make an argument for our, like, in terms of our context today and being readers of our time now, it seems like a lot of emotional abuse is going on, or by our standards today, this would constitute as emotional abuse. And it's interesting to see how this throughout her life has led to this really sort of negative perception that she holds of herself, and how her achievements are kind of like, oh, like how is it possible that you've won this competition? How did you manage it? And it's just really sort of condescending and patronising. But I hope this video has helped in some way, and if any of you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. Thank you. Bye.